The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
We have all seen many resignations in sports over the years. This one's new to me. I'm searching my brain to see if there was a previous sister-in-law situation, which has apparently led to the ouster of baseball union chief Tony Clark. It's not great timing. It's never great timing on these things. But we're going into the last year of the collective bargaining agreement. And you can say, well, we're certain to have baseball this year and 2027 season. That's a long way off, and deadlines make deals, and they can be talking next February, and they can get something done, and no regular season games are going to be missed. All that is true. Well, boy, does this throw a monkey wrench into everything. As far as unions go, Lloyd Howell was pushed out with the NFL Players Association after it was revealed he was using funds for strip clubs, and then there's some other Hanky Panky that they're looking into as well. And then we get word yesterday that Tony Clark is going to resign. And as the story goes, they are looking into improprieties involving a situation, sort of a charity, but that people involved in it were getting these big salaries and very little of the money raised was being actually used for the purpose of getting kids more interested in baseball. But then, as the day goes on, we get this, no. The straw that broke the camel's back was while they were investigating this circumstance that was going on with the money, they uncovered, and this was an independent investigation commissioned by the Players Association. This was not another unit looking at what the Players Association was doing. They investigated themselves with outside counsel, and it was revealed that there was this inappropriate relationship between Tony Clark and his sister-in-law, who had been hired by the Players Association. And on top of that, it would seem on the surface like, oh, this guy's such a workaholic that he's putting a home where the office is. They built this complex in Arizona where the Players Association would be headquartered, and Tony Clark had a residence there. Well, he was using the residence for apparently more than just, watching television and making breakfast. So here's where we are with, a year before things really have to get down to the nitty-gritty. I've seen enough of these work stoppages over the years to know that there's not going to be a deal that's going to be done this time next year. If there is a deal that saves the season and saves all 162, it's probably going to come less than a week before the season starts. I guess the drop-dead date on this would be maybe 2 weeks, because you have to have something of a spring training and they could readjust the schedule. Opening day wouldn't be as scheduled next year in 2027, but they could finagle the schedule to make it work as they have in the past. If you've not been up on these things, since 1972, there have been 9 work stoppages in baseball, 5 strikes, 4 lockouts. Most notable 1981, where they knocked out the season or half the season, and they had to play like a split season. The first half champion played the second half champion, and they made what they could out of that year. And then maybe even more notable, the 1994 strike, which knocked out the entire postseason. And there was reason to believe that they were going to go ahead with what the NFL had done in 1987 with scab players. And it went to court, and Judge Sonia Sotomayor was the one that New York Supreme Court ruled that the owners could not do that, so that brought the players back. Players have always won. The owners seem to be determined this time that they're not going to win. And who they're going to be negotiating with, we're uncertain at this moment. but it's not going to be Tony Clark. So the bombshell news yesterday hitting, and Tony and Mike exploring it with Jeff Passan yesterday on Pardon the Interruption.
It's a really big deal, Tony, and it's a big deal because of how they found out that information. There was an internal investigation being done at the union in response to an Eastern District of New York investigation into the union about questions of financial improprieties and other such things. All of this came from a whistleblower complaint back in November 2024 with the National Labor Relations Board, in which some things, including nepotism, were alleged against Tony Clark. And his sister-in-law had been hired in 2023 to work in the union's Arizona office. And the revelation of this relationship took players on the executive subcommittee, the 8 most powerful players in labor relations with the union, and took it to the point where it really was no coming back. Tony Clark already had been part of this investigation, and federal authorities have been looking into him. But that, on top of everything else, in a year where the collective bargaining agreement expires on December 1st, ultimately, it was just too much for him to keep his job.
Well, Jeff, let's naturally spin it forward. Who do you see replacing Tony Clark? And regardless of who that is it likely to change the union's approach as we go toward and then beyond December 1?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question about the approach. The person who's likeliest is Bruce Meyer. He's the deputy executive director of the MLBPA. He has been the lead negotiator. He's somebody who's been around for one collective bargaining agreement already. And this is such a seminal and important one, Mike, because owners want a salary cap, and the Players Association is going to resist it tooth and nail. Players have, since they got to the big leagues and even before that, they have gotten it nailed into their head that we are the only sport without a salary cap. We are going to remain that way. And so, you know, the timing of this, I mean, it's never good when your executive director is resigning, but it would have been a whole lot worse in October or November. So, you know, players at this point are looking at it like this gives us a chance to get our ducks in a row. And whether it's Bruce Meyer or somebody else internally, at least it's going to be someone with which they are familiar.
Since we know this is about a salary cap, I mean, let's not play around here. Is there some form of it? Because we've seen soft caps, as you know, Jeff, hard caps in other leagues. Is there some form of it that is palatable to the players at all?
No. And it's hard to blame the players, Mike. You know, Juan Soto getting $765 million last year, Kyle Tucker getting $60 million a year this year. This system's been pretty good to the players. And yet the important thing to remember in this situation, it's not just that the public is very pro-cap and would like Major League Baseball to have a cap. It's that it's really hard when you have this institutional opinion that has been hammered into guys' heads for generations to get them off of that when they look at the system right now like it works. Now, you can make an argument, and I think a pretty profound argument, that the system isn't working for all of baseball right now when the Dodgers are paying $550 million for players and the Miami Marlins have a $70 million payroll. The disparity there is enormous. But is there a compromise? Is there a solution to be found without a cap being put into place? I believe that there is. The question at this point is, are the parties that are involved willing to go and find that? Because if not, the 2027 season really is in jeopardy at that point.
All right, we'll get you out of here on this. We'll ask you to be pretty quick. And it's the question you've been expecting. It's everybody's question. What are the realistic chances that there will actually be a work stoppage next season?
When the collective bargaining agreement expires December 1st, Tony, I anticipate Major League Baseball will lock the players out. But a work stoppage is different from a work stoppage with games missed. And do I anticipate that at the end of the day, the games will be missed? I think a lot of it depends on what we see by the middle of February and if there's momentum toward a deal, because mid-March is really the drop-dead date for missing games. And it's the same thing we went through in 2022. I anticipate it happening again in 2027.
Well, Well, there is some follow-up on that. Jeff Passan yesterday on Pardon the Interruption. Mike Vaccaro has a column in the New York Post. Might not be as much of a deadline as Passan says. I'd forgotten about this, but the 2021-22 lockout lasted 99 days but cost no games. They were able to finagle the schedule to make it work. Now, it was, close to mid-March, but, the further you go, the more likely it is you're going to have to cancel games. But miraculously, aside from like 81 and 94 when they knocked out the later part of the season, 1990, I covered that one quite a bit. That was I was front and center on that one. I know that one very well. Lasted 32 days. They didn't miss any games. I was a big part of the announcement that they made a deal. This deal was made at like 1 o'clock in the morning in a hotel ballroom. I was there and I'd been there all day waiting for this to happen. And part of the celebration on both sides was we didn't miss any games. Everybody's going to be okay. Spring training was delayed, but it's okay. Regular season is going to have 162. Then you had the 1976 lockout. This is going way back. That lasted 17 days. They didn't miss any games. There was a strike. People don't remember this before 1981. 1980, there was 8 days, 0 missed games in that. So they have some wiggle room on this, but it becomes sort of the fabric of the sport now that you have all of these long-term drawn-out negotiations and, the two sides, snipe at each other and so forth. The interesting thing about the baseball union is there was never a more group of workers that were in a situation where they had no leverage. Let's put it that way. There are people who work in unions. Let's say you're an electrician and you work for one firm. Well, your hourly rates and pension and things like that are helped by the union. But if you want to go from one company to another, you could. Baseball, for nearly over 100 years. Over 100 years, you could not go from one team to another, even if your contract expired. And it wasn't until 1966. So baseball was at that point 97 years old. 1966, they finally hired somebody who was capable of representing the players in a way that they needed to be represented. Because the way it used to work was, well, you're lucky to be playing a game. People out there working 9 to 5, trying to feed their family. So just shut up and play. And the owners became basically feudal lords. They could control where players went and control where they stayed. If you could trade for them, but you couldn't let them leave. Hotel California, you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And so when Marvin Miller comes in from the Steelworkers Union, this is a labor lawyer who had battled it out for steelworkers. He comes in and he said, this is the most abused group of laborers I have ever seen. And it took time. They had to challenge the reserve clause, which Curt Flood did in 1970. And finally, by 1976, they were able to achieve free agency. And he was a tough hombre. And he gave way to Don Fear, who was his assistant, also a labor lawyer. And Don Fear navigated the various labor issues, including the 1990 lockout. And then he gave way to Michael Weiner. Michael Weiner sadly died of a brain tumor, but he was also experienced in labor law. And Tony Clark, who had retired as a player and joined the Players Association, which was, happening all the way along, too, when Marvin Miller was running it. Like, for example, in the 1990 lockout, the player assistant, retired player, was Mark Belanger. Had a long career with the Orioles, great shortstop with them. And he was the assistant to Don Fear, and he was able to, kind of speak the language of the players, which you need. So Tony Clark comes in to do that. Well, Mark Belanger was never going to be head of the Players Association, and I just don't think it was ever a good idea to make Tony Clark head of the Players Association. He could talk tough, but he just didn't have the experience to do that. And in a column today by Mike Vaccaro in the New York Post, he talked about the succession of leaders. And he said a baseball wag, told him, Marvin Miller to Don Fear to Michael Weiner to Clark is like going from DiMaggio to Mantle to Bertie Williams to Bubba Crosby. Who's Bubba Crosby? Crosby was good enough to be a big leaguer, but only for 4 seasons. He wasn't nearly what Hall of Famers like DiMaggio and Mantle were, and a great player like Bernie Williams, who played on a bunch of championship teams. It's it's something I guess you live with as a baseball fan, but it's not something you look forward to. And would I go to war for a salary cap if I'm a fan? No. If I'm an owner, yeah, because right now we have an economic system in baseball where you really can't have what you have in football. Because of the salary cap, you can see teams like Washington go from the season they had with, 4 wins in 23 to 12 wins in 24. The Patriots, I believe, had 4 wins last year. They make it to the Super Bowl this year. You can have that in football. You really can't have that in baseball because the haves and the have-nots are so severe. With a salary cap, yeah, some teams' payrolls are a little higher, but there's only so far you can go. Baseball, the Dodgers are doing, especially with the deferred money, they're playing a different game than everybody else. And I saw Mike Cohen, the owner of the Mets, who's like Steve Cohen, who says, he's very frustrated at this. Yeah, he keeps throwing money at it, it doesn't work. Dodgers figured out how to make it work. And without a salary cap, that's what you have. You have one team that's got all the money in the world and is using it properly, another team that has all the money in the world, not using it properly, and then you got teams that have no money and not spending it. And this is what you get year to year. If you're a Pittsburgh Pirates fan, you have no shot. If you're a Washington National fan, you have no shot. If you're a Kansas City Royal fan, you have no shot. And this is what the owners are trying to get to. Plus the cost containment. I mean, we have crazy salaries in football, most of the time not guaranteed, but we haven't seen a $756 million contract guaranteed like we have with Juan Soto. Maybe someday odd circumstances will dictate that a quarterback reaches free agency and somebody will give him a deal like that. And with the way the salary cap keeps going up, maybe we'll get a number closer to that. But we just don't have the disparity in football that we have in baseball. And now, at the moment, we have no leadership for them. Coming up, Bryce Harper was on Bussin' with the Boys. That's the Taylor Lewan and Will Compton podcast. Will Compton spent a few years playing for the Redskins. And they do sort of a locker room talk thing. They have a bus that travels around place to place, and the bus has a studio inside. And some interesting revelations from Bryce Harper, including the last-second offer that he got from the Nats to stay in 2018. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Just think of them with this resignation, Tony Clark, head of the Baseball Players Association, because of a report that he had an inappropriate relationship with his sister-in-law, who was an employee of the Players Association. Maybe we have a new definition of nepotism. A lot of companies have nepotism rules, and they make sense. It would prevent, like, a CEO from padding his bank account by hiring his wife for some cush job. They make sense in some cases. In this case, the Players Association, which operates independently, obviously, from Major League Baseball, they didn't have any nepotism rules. Okay, Tony Clark wants to hire his sister-in-law to work for the association. Okay, that's his sister-in-law. It's a family member, but, maybe she's really qualified to do what she can do. Well, apparently there was a relationship between the two of them, with Clark living in a residence which was attached to the Players Association headquarters in Arizona. So maybe this is the fullest extent of nepotism that we've ever seen. Meantime, Bryce Harper making some news in the offseason. Dave Dombrowski, who is the general manager of the Phillies, indicated that maybe Bryce Harper isn't elite anymore. And that ruffled some feathers, which led to this exchange the other day on PTI between Tony and Mike.
We will remember that right at the end of the season, or a little bit afterwards, Dave Dombrowski said of Bryce Harper, he did not have an elite season.
Right.
We're going to have to wait and see, is he still elite,
yes,
or is he just a good player? Bryce Harper didn't say much. Bryce Harper said some stuff yesterday. One thing he said was, I'm not motivated by this kind of stuff. A second thing he said was, I thought we were keeping this stuff in-house. And a third thing he said was, yeah, I did not have an elite year. Now, Bryce Harper is a great player with 2 MVPs. He's also 33 years old and probably at the end of his prime. Dave Dombrowski has had, 6,000 jobs as an executive in Major League Baseball.
Pretty good at this one.
And has been really good at most of them. So I'm going to say this to you, Mike. I will not be surprised if by the end of the year, one of these guys is gone from Philadelphia.
I'm going to beat you to it a little bit in terms of timing. It wouldn't surprise me to see Bryce Harper traded before opening day.
Really?
Why wouldn't you do it?
Would you take on the rest of that contract at 33 years old?
It depends on what team you are and if you think you're close. And if we believe, as we have heard writers, former players and coaches, ball players say, Bryce Harper is a dude in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I love him.
Then if you think you're close, and Bryce Harper can still give you, and you hope, he can give you 20 and 80.
Oh, of course he can do that.
25 and 80. I want 25 home runs. What do you have last year, like 17 or something like that? I want 25 home runs minimum from Bryce Harper. If he can give you that, I take him.
Yeah.
Because the Phillies are going to be out there anyway. They kept my man, and he's got a few more homers than Bryce Harper.
Schwarber.
Like double.
Yeah.
Like triple.
Schwarber is the most interesting leadoff hitter in baseball other than Ohtani.
Why not play some fourth behind Harper, and it may enhance Harper's
although I guess Trey Turner hits leadoff more than Schwarber now. No, that's a team. But with Bryce Harper there and those guys, they go to the playoffs every year. You cannot find fault specifically with Bryce Harper. He has produced.
By the way, 27 home runs. I undercut him a little bit.
Only by 10.
Okay. So, that was the breakdown of the little beef that may be going on between Dombrowski and Harper. Certainly some feathers ruffled there. So we'll see where that goes. There's all kinds of rumors that maybe the Phillies are looking to trade him. He made it no secret when he came here in 2012, or came up to the majors in 2012, that he grew up a Yankee fan. His father was a Yankee fan. They grew up in Las Vegas, didn't have a team there. His dad loved the Yankees. He loved the Yankees. He didn't wear number 7, but he wore 34. Combination of the two. He now wears number 3 with the Phillies. But Harper was on the other day with Bussin' with the Boys. That's a podcast that's done by 2 former NFL players, Taylor Lewan and Will Compton, who was a linebacker from Nebraska, had a 5 or 6 year NFL career, played here for 2 or 3, was known as a really smart player. Not a great player, but a smart player. And they've done really well with this podcast. They've gotten a couple of shots on ESPN. Looks like they're building media careers in the modern way and successful at it. And they do sort of a locker room type of conversation with an athlete. And they did one with Harper, and they got into leaving here. Now, this is the way I saw it when he left here after the 2018 season. Going into the 2018 season, it looked like they were going to do everything to keep this guy. This is a generational player, MVP. If you're ever going to win a World Series, you're going to have Bryce Harper to do it. And through an odd series of injuries, Juan Soto comes up, and by the end of the 2028 season, he was ready to fill Bryce Harper's shoes and maybe even be a better player. And so the Lerners were faced with, do we give Bryce Harper market value contract, another Scott Boras client, or do we make him an offer that doesn't look like we're being cheap? It's just like we're just not willing to go all out to keep him because we got Soto and we'll spend the money on a pitcher, which is what they did. But there is a version of what happened here, and maybe Ted Lerner's no longer with us, but maybe Mark Lerner would corroborate this. But again, when it came time for Harper to either stay or go, Mark Lerner was telling people, I don't think we're going to be able to keep him. And his stance was, look, he may get $400 million someplace else. We're not prepared to pay that. He didn't get $400 million, and Scott Boras had to huff and puff and take him everywhere just to get it up to $330. Why was $330 important? Because Giancarlo Stanton had set the market at $325. So Boras, ego-wise, had to get Harper to the highest dollar amount ever. Now, the per year was less than what the Nats offered. Nats offered $300 million for 10 years. He wound up getting $330 for 13 years, the contract that he's currently playing under and maybe or maybe not living up to, depending on how you look at it. But this is Harper on the departure from Washington as he discussed it on Bussin' with the Boys with the coach Taylor Lewan and Will Compton.
Mike Rizzo, I loved him. He was our GM and president at the time. He was awesome. The team we were great, man. We were always a pitcher away. And so for me, when we got into that offseason, I remember sitting on my couch in Vegas and they had signed Patrick Corbin. And this was like November, December. And I remember looking at my wife, Kayla, and I said to her, they're going to win the World Series this year. They finally got the pitcher they needed. And so they ended up going like 14 and like 27 or 14 and 36 or something in the first like 50 games. And they turned it around and ended up winning the World Series. So when they did that, obviously, like as a player, I rooted for them. I love the guys that I played with. I understood, like I was with them for 7 years and all the guys that I made relationships with, I was very happy to see them do it. Obviously I want to win one because I haven't yet. But organizationally, this was the best thing for me to go to Philly and play there. I think it was just time for me personally to get away from there and do my thing with a different organization. And I made the right decision. I absolutely love Philly. I enjoy it. The breakup, I don't know. I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about the fans or anything else. They boo me every time I go in there. You know, it's sports. It is what it is.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's just weird more than anything. Yeah. You know, just because, I don't know. I feel like I did a lot for their organization and their team and stuff. But at the same time, like it's sports. It is what it is. But I have no bad animosity towards them or anything else.
Watching them win the World Series?
No, because I mean, for me, like I understand the hard work that goes into it and understanding the guys that I played with and built relationships with. Like I was so pumped for Trey Turner and Ryan Zimmerman and all these guys that have done it. And so obviously I would have loved to have been there and won one because we did get so close and understand we were such a good team at all those points of when I played there. I mean, we never had a losing record, I don't think, in the 7 years that I was there. Made it to the playoffs, maybe 5 out of the 7. And so, I mean, just a great time and had a really good, ride with them. But turning the page to Philly, I mean, it's been unbelievable.
Yeah.
So.
How does the free agency in baseball work, and how did you end up on the Phillies? Like, what other teams were involved? Yeah.
So it was very quiet at the beginning, I would say. I mean, it was funny. So going back to the Nationals, so we had our last game in DC, and then we went on the road that year to play. I think the final was in Colorado. And so we were in a rain delay. It was like the 6th inning, and my coach walked over to me, or my manager, and was like, "Hey, old man's in the office." And I was like, "That's weird." So I go in and I sit down with old man Lerner, and he's their owner. He was their owner. And so I remember sitting there, and he hands me an envelope and says, "This is an offer you won't be able to refuse." This is during a game. Middle of the game.
Middle of the game. Old man wants to see you.
Middle of the game.
Rain delay. This is the right time to come to Bryce and tell him it's time.
And so I was like, "What? Like, are we serious right now? Like, this is how it's happening right now?" And obviously my agent wasn't there, had no idea this was happening, nothing. So I go back to my chair, and I'm sitting at my chair in my locker, and I was like, "Hold on." So I text my wife. I'm like, "Hey, come down to the door. Like, I need to talk to you real quick." She's like, "What?" I was like, "Okay." So she comes down. I hand her the envelope. I'm like, "He just offered me, X amount of dollars." Like, she goes, he did this during a game? I said, "Yeah. Isn't that weird?" And so I call my agent, and he goes, "Go down to the fine print." And so I go down to the fine print, and it's like 70% deferred over the next 30 years of your life. And so it was like the deal with the deferrals of like 70% of it. And so he's like, "Yeah, that's not a good offer." And so I go back to my locker. But just the moment of that, like, I was just like, that's wild,
Right, like, why? What would make him not want to go through the agent?
Just in that moment, it was just kind of weird. Like, it was just
feels like you watched the doc with the Cowboys, like a Jerry Jones,
right? Like, it was a really weird perspective as I was sitting there, because I mean, my season's not over yet, obviously. Like, and I understand, like, you want to get a deal done. I get that totally. Like, I had people come up to me all year, throughout the whole year, kind of trying to get things done. And so that was different. I mean, obviously the when the off season kind of hit, you're not allowed to talk to anybody until the World Series is over, and then you have like a brief period, and then they go to GM meetings, and then they have winter meetings and stuff. Winter meetings were in Vegas where I was, so that was kind of cool, like being able to go down and meet with teams. But I had some really good meetings. We had the White Sox, Padres, San Francisco, Dodgers came in late, and then Philly. Talked to them as well at that point. So I had 5 teams kind of talk to me. My deal with the Dodgers was less money, but very similar to what Kyle Tucker's on right now that he signed. Obviously not to the extent of what Kyle's at right now, but very similar 4-year deal, opt-outs, all that kind of stuff. I had one team offer me a 1 year for 48, I think it was 1 year 48 or 1 year 50, and I kind of was like, I want to take that. And the team that it was really good, and so I was like, man, I would have loved that.
You want to say the team?
I don't want to.
He doesn't want to say it.
I know.
Did the one team offer me, and I was like, I kind of want to go to that team. It's like, okay, what's the team? Did this team have pinstripes?
No. The Yankees were not in at all.
Because you grew up,
I grew up a Yankee fan.
Yeah, Yankee fan.
Yep, I did.
And they've never been in the loop with you?
They were never in the loop at the beginning.
Were you hopeful that the Yankees would come into the circle?
I think you're always hopeful for big market teams to be in, just because it drives money or anything else.
Right.
But I loved the Pinstripes growing up. I loved all the players that played there and the winning mentality that they had. But at the same time, they had just got Giancarlo Stanton from Miami, and so he was on a big deal. They had some young guys coming up that they believed in more than me and stuff. I told teams I could play first base, and they didn't believe me that I could play first base. And so they all just wanted me to play the outfield, which was fine. But now it's funny that I'm at first base and, top 3, in Gold Glove every year. But I don't know. It was cool to be kind of wanted, right? Like you kind of go into the situation and you talk to all these teams, and it's weird kind of also sitting there understanding that you have to put your faith in these teams without even knowing these organizations besides what they tell you, right? Like you can talk to anybody on other teams, but I talked to White Sox guys. They're like, oh, it's a great organization. These people are great. If I would sign with the White Sox, I probably already been traded out of there because they've been in a rebuild for, the last 10 years or ever since Konerko left, So it's been it was a whirlwind. Making the decisions that I did, having the Dodgers come in late was tough for me. Because they're a really good team, and you're sitting there and you're like 4-year deal. And I was like, man, I don't really want to go through this again. I didn't want any opt-outs. Like that was a big thing for me.
So you were close to the finish line with the Phillies, and then that's when the Dodgers come in. It's kind of like, oh, shit.
Yeah. So I was close so San Diego had signed Machado maybe 2 weeks after my deal, or 2 weeks after I met with them. They wanted a third baseman. They kind of told me that. They're like, hey, we want an infielder. We need an infielder. And so they went with Machado. But my best meeting actually was the White Sox. They actually came in. I believed in a lot of their stuff and their young guys. Jim Tomei was in there with me. And actually, I said to Tomei, I said, what do you like hitting better though? The White Sox or Phillies? And he kind of was like, they're both great. He's
yeah.
But I asked point blank too to Bochy. I said, hey, is this your last year coaching in San Fran? And he was very upfront with me and said yes. And
that
so
was a big one
I
for
was
you.
I'm happy that he told me that, because I would have loved to play for Bruce Bochy, obviously. One of the greatest managers in baseball of all time. But for him to be upfront with me in that situation was huge for me in my career, because I probably would have went and thought about San Fran a lot more because of Bochy comparative to anybody else.
Right.
But at the final stretch, I felt like it was always going to be Philly. They offered obviously $330. San Fran was at 315, and then at the last moment they came up to $330. Every team was pretty much at $330. Every team, they were all kind of in cahoots about that and talking and stuff. They say they don't, but it is what it is.
So San Fran could have been a move.
It could have been, but my life just doesn't match that city.
Well, he is Mormon, but whatever that means, you can find any place to live in any city. But the couple of takeaways on that. One is the part about Ted Lerner, who at that point was in his at least 80s, maybe 90s, calling him into the office during a rain delay with a couple games left to go in the season in Colorado, handing him an envelope and saying, take it or leave it. Now, you might say, oh, old man, naive, what's he thinking there? That was a work, Bryce. Ted Lerner knew exactly what he was doing. He had dealt with Scott Boras for years. He knew the way Scott Boras operated. He also knew that it would be a public relations disaster if they came to the bargaining table and came up way short on the offer, and he went someplace else. So this was what they considered to be a reasonable offer, which it was, $300 million for 10 years. He got $330 for 13, and it was because, and Harper's talking about the other teams being in cahoots. No. They finally realized this is where it's going to end because it was an ego thing, and it was the ability of Scott Boras to say, we got Bryce Harper more money than any other player in the history of Major League Baseball. They got $5 million past Giancarlo Stanton, and then Mike Trout signed like less than a year later for $100 million more. So the high water mark didn't last that long. But it wasn't like, this is like a crazy old man giving him an offer and thinking it was going to be legit. He knew exactly it was going to be rejected. He knew it was, and so did Scott Boras. So that was more show than anything else. And as far as the Yankees not making him an offer, kind of surprising. And maybe that relates to these rumors now that the Yankees are looking to make a deal for him. His contract, I think it has $178 million left on it, which in today's dollars is not unreasonable. So maybe that's something that could happen. And he's got to be the one to say it's okay, because the deal has no trade and it has it does not have an opt-out in it. So this is going to be his call. But if things have gone sour in Philadelphia, and if he does not like management anymore, who questions whether he's elite, or at least Dave Dombrowski, the GM, does, I don't know about ownership, then maybe it is time to go. But, the backstory of leaving Washington and being shopped around. And Boras was desperate. He had to get that number up to 330. That was what he was all about. And if he had to go to 14 years, I bet he would have done it. That's just the way the money game works. And as it turned out, look, they took the money that they were going to give to Bryce Harper, and they went out and they got Patrick Corbin. They got the left-handed pitcher that they needed. You heard Harper at the beginning of the conversation say once he heard that Corbin was coming to Washington, he thought they would win the World Series. This is also the same Bryce Harper who a few years earlier had said when they got Max Scherzer, dude, where's my ring? Like, we ought to win it all. And the season ended with Jonathan Papelbon trying to choke him and the team not making the playoffs and the manager getting fired. So, you always got to look at this stuff, as Steve Spurrier says, hindsight is 50-50. And what you get from Bryce Harper in 2026 is a version of what happened 8 years ago. Hard to believe it's been that long since he left Washington. Won the home run derby at the All-Star game here in 2018, and that was his swan song. He was gone at the end of the season, did not make the playoffs, and then following year, Davey Martinez takes them to the World Series with the help of the money that they didn't have to pay Bryce Harper. Coming up in the next hour, we'll remember Doug Moe, who was a tremendous character and an excellent coach. Passed away yesterday. I've got memories of him from my days in San Antonio. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Doug Moe passed away yesterday at the age of 87. Someone I really enjoyed being around in the early part of my career, and I'll give you some memories of him. He seemed to have the right perspective for what he did. He was a basketball coach in the entertainment business, had fun with what he did. Mick Cronin, every time I see something about him, he sounds and looks like a guy who either expects to be fired or wants to be fired. He had success in the Midwest. He was a coach, I believe, at Cincinnati, and then he got his shot to become the coach at UCLA. And that job has chewed up a lot of people post John Wooden. There's no question about that. But Wooden has been gone for a long time. He hasn't coached in over 50 years. So the shadow isn't the same, and he has the opportunity to make something of it. And he's got a team, actually, that's on the bubble. They're not out of it. They played well. They'd won 5 of 6. The record's 17-9, 9-6 in the Big Ten. I mean, they're there. They're right there as a possibility to be one of the teams in the NCAA tournament. But they got blown out again last night. They lost at Michigan State, and they lost by 30 points over the weekend to Michigan. So they have now lost back-to-back games by 20 or more for the first time since the 44-45 season. Jeez. Even still, they're still a bubble team at this point. But there was a point in the game where the Bruins were down 77-50, 4.5 minutes to play at Michigan State, and UCLA center Stephen Jamerson, who was a former Michigan State player, was called for a flagrant foul on Carson Cooper from behind on a dunk attempt. And rather than either put him on the bench or scold him for the foul, Cronin sent him to the locker room. He said, "Get the hell out of here." Sent Jamison to the locker room. And Cronin explained after the game, true toughness is how you compete and how you go to work every day. Steve's a good kid. He made a bad decision. But if you want to be a tough guy, you need to do it during the game for a block out, for a rebound. So I was thoroughly disappointed. The guy was defenseless in the air. I know Steve was trying to block the shot, but the game's a 25-point game. You can't do that. But that wasn't all. During the game, Michigan State fans were chanting the name of the UCLA center, Xavier Booker, who was a former five-star recruit, had played at Michigan State for a couple of years, and then transferred to UCLA in April. And he didn't play much. He had 2 points and 2 rebounds in 25 minutes, and the fans were giving it to him because they were familiar with him, having seen him play at Michigan State, which led to this question in the locker room to Mick Cronin and this absolutely asinine response.
What was your thought in the student section chanting Booker's name?
I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section.
I just meant overall the way that you
I would like to give you a kudos for the worst question I've ever been asked.
Did you like
you should take it.
The preparation of the...
Do you really think I care about the other team's
No, I don't
section?
think you care about the other
Are you
team's
raising your voice at me?
No, I'm just...
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Come on, dude.
No reason.
Come on. Yes, you are. Everybody's standing here listening to you. Everybody. This is on camera. They can hear you. I answered the question. I could give a rat's ass about the other team's student section. I coach UCLA. I don't care about Michigan State students. I mean, who cares?
Well, you could have said that. You could have said, I don't care about the students. But then you have to take it to another level by personally insulting the reporter who asked a legitimate question about a storyline in the game, and you say he gets a prize for the worst question, and then when you confront him again and he starts to defend himself, hey, you're raising your voice at me. Well, the coach always has the upper hand in these things. And, get out. How many championships have you won at UCLA? You clearly don't like it there. He's always complaining about the travel. That's one of his other things. Oh, yeah, we have to go so far to play these Eastern teams. Hey, it's what you signed up for when you went to the Big Ten. You took the Big Ten money. You know that nice paycheck you're getting as coach at UCLA? Yeah, a lot of that money comes from being in the Big Ten. So get over yourself. And that's just, what a jerk. What a complete jerk. Not a jerk. Doug Moe. Doug Moe was truly a beloved figure in basketball. He had quite a career, and if you've been watching, I watched all 4 parts of it. I think it's really good. I'm old enough to remember it. It's about the history of the ABA, and it's called Soul Power, and it was produced by Julius Erving, who's the most important figure in the history of the ABA. But in the early days, the league thrived with players like Doug Moe. I say thrived. They weren't drawing, but they got themselves on the map with players like Doug Moe, who had a special circumstance similar to Connie Hawkins. Connie Hawkins was never found guilty of anything. He was just implicated in associating with gamblers. And here was the extent of Doug Moe's transgression, which kept him out of the NBA forever. He never played in the NBA, played in the ABA, but he played at North Carolina with Larry Brown. Larry Brown became a very good point guard in the ABA. Probably didn't get a shot in the NBA because he was small. He's probably under 6 feet tall, and they were looking for big guards then like Oscar Robertson, but he did play in the ABA. I saw him play for the Washington Caps, and he and Doug Moe were teammates at North Carolina, and Moe was a great player. He was a 6'5" forward, earned All-American twice, and his college career was cut off in his senior year because of a point-shaving scandal for which he received $75 to fly to a meeting. So they gave him the money to go to a meeting, but when he went to the meeting, they asked him to shave points, and he said no. So he never agreed to shave points, didn't shave points, but was kept out of the NBA for that. So he played in Europe for a few years, and then along comes the ABA in 1967, and he teams up with Larry Brown, and they played for a couple of years together. And Moe was a really good player in the ABA, 3-time All-Star, but he had knee problems, and his career ended. And Larry Brown becomes a coach, a very successful coach early on, and Doug Moe is his assistant. And Moe likes being an assistant. He thinks this is pretty cool. You get to watch basketball games, you hang out with the players, you get to fly. It's a lot of fun. And he had no ambition to be a head coach, but the San Antonio job opened up, and Larry Brown said, you ought to take that. So he takes it. And he goes to San Antonio at the time that I happened to be there. I came to San Antonio in 1979, early in 79, spent the first year of my career in Port Arthur, Texas. It was like minor league baseball in those days. So I moved up to the bigger market in San Antonio, and Moe is there. And I hit it at the right time. This team, I'm telling you, the Spurs in those days, they were old school ABA, and they were fun to watch. They had a point guard named Jimmy Silas. They called him Captain Late because he would always make big plays at the end of games. They had Larry Keenan, who'd been a great player with the New York Nets, and he winds up in San Antonio. He's a terrific forward, perfect complement to their superstar player in George Gervin. They had Billy Paltz, the Whopper, an old school center from the days of New York City, and played at St. John's. He had sort of a pot belly, but he fit into the whole menagerie. And they had Louis Dampier, who was a great three-point shooter from the heyday of the ABA. And, man, they could score. They were fun. And they were good. They played the Bullets twice in the playoffs, once in 78 when the Bullets went on to win the championship, and then 79 they meet again. And it goes down to the wire in the Eastern Conference Finals. Yeah, the Spurs were in the East because when the merger happened in 1976, the way they lined things up, they said, well, we'll have to do this for now, so we'll stash San Antonio in the East. And they become a rival with the Bullets for those 2 years. That's what led to the famous quote from Dick Motta, the opera ain't over till the fat lady sings. He was watching in his hotel room as they were playing San Antonio and watching Dan Cook, who was the local sportscaster, asked by the anchor about the series with the Bullets, whether it was over or not. I think the Spurs were down 3-1 at that point. And Dan Cook said, the opera ain't over till the fat lady sings. And so when they asked Dick Motta about it in practice, he said, well, as the guy on TV said, the opera ain't over till the fat lady sings. And that became sort of the motto for that team as they went on to win the championship. I still have a T-shirt from those days. Anyway, Doug Moe went on to have this success in San Antonio. And I mentioned this yesterday on Twitter. After they lost to the Bullets in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals in 79, they had a 3-1 lead. They let it get away. Doug Moe went off on the referees, John Vanek and Paul Mihalik. And he said, Vanek and Mihalik stole the game. We had that game won. They stole it with bad calls. Well, fines weren't the same then as they are now. So he got a $3,000 fine from the NBA. $3,000 fine. He was probably making $150, if that, per year. So $3,000 fine was somewhat significant. And the baseline bums, the fans who would razz the other team from the behind the basket at the old Hemisphere Arena in San Antonio, they pooled their resources and they got $3,000 together, and they had it converted to pennies. And they put it in wheelbarrows, and they dumped the pennies in front of the Spurs offices to pay Doug Moe's fine. That was all part of the picture. He goes to the Denver Nuggets, and he was, after he got fired in San Antonio, after that run ended, he goes to Denver, and he's successful there too. I mean, they have a fun team. He's there for 10 years, and the league, they led the league in scoring 5 straight seasons in the early 80s. He didn't run plays. He just had a motion offense and let his guys go. And he would drop a lot of F-bombs and stuff during the game. Couldn't have kids sit behind the bench. But he had a fun group, and Alex English and Kiki Vandeweghe finished 1 and 2 in scoring in the league, 1982 to 1983. And they had a famous game in 83 where they lost to the Pistons 186 to 184. That is the highest scoring game in NBA history. And then there was a game that was played in 1990, which was his last season with the Denver Nuggets. He got fired at the end of that season. And they're playing, it's early season game at Portland, and they're down big. And the final score of this game, they lost this by 40 points, 156 to 116. But as they were looking at, the records, they thought, we need to get past 150 points, which was the previous high for a Portland team. So Moe was so fed up with his team, he said, let's just let them score. Let's let them do it. And Moe said after the game, he said, our defense was getting so tenacious there, I was afraid they weren't going to score 150. I was really scared. So even called a timeout to make sure that Portland would have enough time to score. They had 5 uncontested baskets, and the league didn't like that. Scotty Sterling was the head of discipline for the NBA and fined Moe $5,000 and suspended him for 2 games. The statement from the league, it's clear from your own admissions, from the statements of game officials and Coach Jack Ramsey, and Ramsey was the coach of the Blazers at that time, and newspaper accounts, you did in fact take a 20-second timeout with 1:12 remaining in the game and instruct your team to stop playing defense and let Portland have it, meaning the record. and they didn't like that. So Moe, he paid the fine. He said in view of the publicity they got, the league had to do something. As far as the act itself, I find there's nothing wrong with it. And when he got fired by Portland, by Denver after 1990, he showed up at the news conference in a Hawaiian shirt and with a bottle of champagne and said that he was very happy to be paid for doing nothing. Which I thought was good. He got one more shot with the Sixers, but that didn't work out as well. And, spent his years in retirement. And his wife, who he called Big Jane, she liked San Antonio so much that after his coaching career had ended in Philadelphia in the early 90s, they moved back to San Antonio. And 10 years ago, he was put in the San Antonio Sports Hall of Fame, and the local NBC affiliate did this feature on Moe with great comments from the Iceman, George Gervin.
Wow, having fun. That's my funnest memory. Coach, he let you play.
When you think of Doug Moe's Spurs of the late 1970s, only one word comes to mind.
His style, man, was just fun.
It was fun and run and gun.
We're going to get up more shots than the next team. 50, if we could, 50 shots more. He recognized that, we had to be a fun and winning team in order to stay around San Antonio.
The Spurs were the wild ABA Mavericks in a stodgy, buttoned-up NBA. And they may have been even wilder if it wasn't for Mrs. Moe, affectionately called Big Jane.
He always say, Big Jane, the foundation, because, Doug was a crazy guy.
His mother used to say, if it weren't for me, he'd probably be in prison because he would have never filed taxes,
Doug Moe's wide-open style wasn't just fun, it won. With the exception of Greg Popovich, no coach in Spurs history won more games. And Moe did it in only 3.5 seasons. The Spurs made the playoffs every year, and they were just 1 game away from the NBA Finals.
Get up on him now, let's go! Get up on him!
He also made history, getting George Gervin the NBA scoring title. Denver's David Thompson had scored 73 points in the final game of the season to overtake the Iceman. Gervin needed 59 in the Spurs' final game. So what did Doug Moe do?
We just decided as a team we were going to get Ice the ball and see if he could break the record.
Now, what other coach, I don't think there's another coach in the NBA would be that creative.
Amazingly, he had an unbelievable, fantastic night, and he had the 63 points before the end of the third quarter, somewhere in the third quarter. So if we let him go, he might have hit 100.
I still thank him today, and I'm thanking him right now, for making that opportunity possible for me, and I owe it all to you, Coach, and your leadership, and I appreciate you for that opportunity.
Doug Moe, a Maverick, a winner, and a Spurs legend, and a very smart man. Why did he move back to San Antonio?
Big Jane said we're going back to San Antonio.
He deserved to be in the, San Antonio Sports Hall of Fame with all the impact that he had on this city. Because, we was in the beginning stages. So he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm glad, that he is, becoming, a part of San Antonio's history.
To be elected to the Hall of Fame is something special. So for me, and it's also special because my grandkids think it's great. So that makes it a little extra.
Believe me, I can relate to that. That was Doug Moe 10 years ago when he went in the San Antonio Hall of Fame, passing away at the age of 87. Great career as a coach with the Spurs, and even better career as a 10-year coach with the Denver Nuggets. They were a lot of fun, scored a lot of points, didn't win a championship, but kept the fans entertained. And in that feature, you hear a very insightful comment from George Gervin. The Spurs had originally started out as the Dallas Chaparrals, and they just weren't drawing in Dallas, so they moved the team to San Antonio, I want to say 74, 75. So, by the time Gervin and Moe come together in the merger with the NBA in 1976, they're not really on that solid a footing. And what they needed was to be entertaining, because at the time, the two top sports in San Antonio were high school football and rodeo. There was no NBA team. Basketball wasn't a big deal. There was not a major college that played any big level of basketball, and you didn't have NFL team. The favorite NFL team was the Cowboys. That was 5 hours away, 6 hours away. So to have an NBA team in town was a really big deal. But you have to keep drawing the people, which they were able to do with this entertaining style of basketball. And I think Doug Moe, who was aptly described by Peter Vesey as the Brooklyn guy who never left the front of the candy store, a hang-around guy, just, liked to have fun, didn't take anything too seriously, winds up ending, going back in retirement to San Antonio because he was so liked there, and they felt comfortable there. He and his wife also, I guess, from Brooklyn as well. But it was a great story, and just really enjoyable person. And I think a lot of people in life who take themselves too seriously, like Mick Cronin, it's very refreshing to have someone who takes his craft seriously. Moe was, when he coached a game, he was like Gary Williams. He was intense. But off the court, he was a loosey-goosey guy who liked to enjoy himself. One other NBA thing, and this is really Meshuggah yesterday. Mark Cuban put out a post on Twitter saying that fans should embrace tanking. He says fans know their team can't win every game. And he says they know that only one team can win a ring. What fan that they care about, what fan cares about the team record? Hope they will get better and have a chance to compete for the playoffs and then maybe a ring. So, in other words, get on board with the idea of tanking so eventually you can get a ring. That's one way to get closer is the draft and trades and cap room. You have to have a better chance of improving all three ways when you tank. He did say, and I agree with this, they should make the game more affordable for kids. And he said that tanking is not the biggest problem. It's affordability. He said, as the owner of the Mavericks, which he's not anymore, he sold the team, but he had him for 23 years. He said, we didn't tank often, only a few times over 23 years. But when we did, our fans appreciated it, and it got us where we could improve and trade up to get Luka and improve our team. That must be a shot at current ownership, who traded Luka to the Lakers. No, it's hard to embrace tanking, and they've got to do something about it. Adam Silver made that clear. And, there's all kinds of suggestions, even if you want to tie into what Cuban said about the ticket pricing. Tom Lavero suggested that once it's determined that a team is tanking, that they would have to give refunds to the season ticket holders. Anything's in play. But right now they don't have a solution, and they got a third of the league tanking, and that's not a good thing. All right, that's it for me. Bram is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.